You don't belong here, kid. This festival is for real musicians, not little boys playing pretend. What would you do if someone said this to a 12-year-old child who just wanted to share his gift with the world? When Marcus Thompson innocently asked if he could play piano with the headline band at the prestigious Riverside Music Festival, he never expected to be laughed at, mocked, and humiliated in front of thousands. But sometimes, the universe has a way of revealing truth in the most unexpected moments. What happened next left 20,000 people speechless and changed everything everyone thought they knew about talent, prejudice, and second chances. This is a story that will challenge what you believe about hidden genius. Dear viewer, I humbly request you to watch or listen till the end and rate this story out of 10. Your rating will help me to give you better stories in next videos. If you are watching my story for the first time, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the Riverside Festival grounds as 12-year-old Marcus Thompson pressed his face against the car window, his eyes wide with wonder. The massive venue stretched before them like a musical wonderland, with colorful banners fluttering in the breeze and the distant sound of instruments being tuned floating through the air. Now remember, baby, Grandma Rose said softly, adjusting her janitor's uniform as she parked their old sedan in the employee lot, you stay close to me today. This isn't like our usual cleaning nights when the place is empty. Marcus nodded eagerly, his small hands already tapping rhythms on his knees. I know, Grandma. But maybe I'll get to see the piano on the main stage? The Steinway Model D you told me about? Rose Thompson looked at her grandson with a mixture of love and concern. She'd been working as a janitor at the Riverside venue for 15 years, and in all that time, she'd seen how the wealthy patrons and famous musicians treated people like them, invisible at best, nuisances at worst. But Marcus had something special, something that even their tough neighborhood hadn't been able to dim. We'll see, baby. We'll see. As they walked through the employee entrance, security guard James gave them a warm smile. Hey there, Ms. Rose. And young Marcus. Big day today, huh? The biggest. Marcus replied, bouncing on his toes. Sterling Heights is headlining. They have the best pianist, well, second best, he added with a shy grin that made James chuckle. Second best? Who's first? Marcus just smiled mysteriously and hurried after his grandmother. The festival was already buzzing with activity. Vendors set up their booths selling overpriced merchandise, sound technicians ran final checks on the equipment, and early attendees, mostly wealthy families from the suburban districts, began filing in with their VIP passes gleaming in the sunlight. Rose led Marcus to the janitor's closet where she gathered her supplies. You can sit right here, she pointed to a small bench in the corner, and read your book while I work. But Marcus's attention was elsewhere. Through the narrow window, he could see straight to the main stage where roadies were setting up instruments. And there it was, the magnificent Steinway piano, its black surface gleaming like a midnight lake under the stage lights. Grandma, Marcus whispered, do you think anyone would mind if I just looked at it? Just for a minute? Rose sighed. She knew that look in his eyes, the same look he got when he used to sneak into the venue after hours, before she caught him and nearly had a heart attack thinking something had happened to him. That was how she'd discovered his gift. She'd found him at 2 a.m, playing the most beautiful melody she'd ever heard on that very same Steinway, his small fingers dancing across the keys like he'd been born to it. Not now, baby. Maybe later when the crowds thin out. As Rose began her rounds, emptying trash bins and wiping down surfaces, Marcus tried to focus on his book. But the music calling from outside was too strong. Every time a band did their soundcheck, his fingers would unconsciously move, playing along to melodies only he could hear in their fullness. Around noon, the headline band arrived. Marcus watched through the window as Sterling Heights emerged from their luxury tour bus. Richard Sterling, the lead singer, stepped out first, tall, imposing, with perfectly styled blonde hair and designer sunglasses that probably cost more than Rose made in a month. He was followed by the rest of the band, Derek on drums, Kyle on guitar, and Emma on bass. But it was their pianist that made Marcus lean forward with interest. The man looked pale, almost green, and was being supported by 2 roadies. Food poisoning, Marcus heard one of them say as they passed by the janitor's closet. Threw up 3 times on the way here. Richard Sterling's voice boomed with frustration. This is a disaster. We're headlining in 6 hours and Connor can barely stand. Get him some medicine, water, anything. He has to perform. Marcus's heart began racing. Their pianist was sick. Really sick. This could be, no, it was crazy to even think about it. But still. Grandma, Marcus said when Rose returned with her cart, their pianist is sick. That's not our concern, baby. But what if, Marcus Thompson, don't you even think about it. These aren't our people. This isn't our world. But Marcus couldn't let it go. As the afternoon wore on and news spread that Connor was getting worse, not better, Marcus felt something pulling him toward the stage. It wasn't about showing off or being famous. It was about the music, the beautiful music that deserved to be played, to be heard, to be shared with all these people who had come to experience something special. Finally, when Rose was called to clean up a spill in the VIP section, Marcus made his decision. He slipped out of the janitor's closet and walked toward the backstage area, his heart pounding but his resolve firm. He didn't know that this simple walk would change everything, not just for him, but for everyone who would witness what was about to unfold. The security guard at the backstage entrance looked down at him skeptically. You lost, kid? No, sir, Marcus replied, his voice steady despite his nerves. I wanted to talk to someone about playing piano. Their pianist is sick, and I can help. The guard laughed, not unkindly. That's sweet, kid, but this is a professional festival. Run along now. But Marcus stood his ground. He'd come too far to turn back now. Please, sir. Just let me talk to them. 5 minutes. Something in the boy's eyes made the guard pause. But before he could respond, a shadow fell over them both. Richard Sterling himself had appeared, having overheard the conversation. What's this about? He demanded, his voice sharp with stress and irritation. Marcus looked up at the famous musician, gathered all his courage, and spoke the words that would set everything in motion. Sir, I heard your pianist is sick. I know all your songs. I can play your set. Please, just give me a chance. Richard Sterling stared down at Marcus for a long moment, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief, and finally to something that made Marcus's stomach twist: amusement. But it wasn't the kind type of amusement. It was the kind that made you feel 2 inches tall. Did you just? Richard began, then burst into laughter. Derek. Kyle. Emma. You have to hear this. He called to his bandmates who were standing near their equipment. This kid thinks he can play Connor's parts. The other band members wandered over, their expressions ranging from curious to dismissive. Emma, the bassist, at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. Richard, he's just a kid. No, this is precious, Richard continued, circling Marcus like a shark. Tell me, boy, where did you study? Juilliard? Berkeley? Or wait, let me guess, YouTube University? Marcus lifted his chin, refusing to be intimidated despite the heat rising to his cheeks. I taught myself, sir. But I know every song in your catalog. Midnight Reflections, Silver Lining, Crescendo of Dreams, I can play them all. You taught yourself? Richard's voice dripped with condescension. Do you have any idea what level of complexity our arrangements have? The pianist needs to handle 7 different time signatures in Midnight Reflections alone. Connor has a master's degree from the Royal Academy of Music. I know, Marcus said quietly. The third movement transitions from July 8th to May 4th, then to 9/8 before returning to common time. The difficulty isn't in the time signatures, it's in maintaining the emotional arc while navigating the technical passages. For a brief second, Richard's smirk faltered. But he quickly recovered, his voice becoming even more mocking. Oh, so you can recite music theory. Impressive. Can you also recite how many years it takes to develop the muscle memory for professional performance? Can you tell me about the hours of practice required to, Marcus? Everyone turned to see Grandma Rose hurrying toward them, her face a mixture of worry and frustration. Marcus, what are you doing here? I told you to stay. She stopped short when she saw who her grandson was talking to, her protective instincts immediately kicking in. Is this your boy? Richard asked, his tone suggesting he'd found the source of the problem. Ma'am, you might want to teach him about boundaries. This is a professional venue, not a talent show for. He paused, looking at Rose's uniform, that helps children. The words hung in the air like a slap. Derek, the drummer, shifted uncomfortably. Rich, come on, man. But Richard was on a roll now, his stress about Connor's illness finding an outlet in cruel superiority. Look, kid, I get it. You probably play a little keyboard at home, maybe impress your friends at school. But this is the real world. The Riverside Festival has a reputation. We have 20,000 people coming tonight expecting excellence, not some. He gestured dismissively at Marcus's worn sneakers and second-hand clothes, charity case thinking he can play with the big boys. Richard Sterling, Rose stepped forward, her voice steady despite her anger. My grandson has more musical talent in his little finger than most people have in their entire body. But you're right about one thing, this isn't his world. Not because he lacks talent, but because this world is too small-minded to recognize genius when it doesn't come wrapped in privilege. Genius? Richard laughed again, pulling out his phone. This is too good. Kyle, are you recording this? The janitor's grandson is apparently a genius. He turned back to Marcus. Okay, genius. Prove it. There's a piano right over there in the warm-up tent. Play something. Anything. Show us this amazing self-taught talent. Marcus started toward the tent, but Rose grabbed his arm. Baby, you don't have to prove anything to them. It's okay, Grandma, Marcus said softly. I want to. They all followed him to the tent where an upright piano sat in the corner. It was nothing like the Steinway on the main stage, but Marcus approached it with the same reverence he always showed any instrument. He sat down, adjusted the bench, and placed his hands on the keys. This should be entertaining, Richard muttered to his bandmates. $20 says he plays chopsticks or heart and soul. But as Marcus's fingers touched the keys, something magical happened. He began with a soft, melancholic introduction, not one of Sterling Heights' songs, but an original composition. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, complex in its simplicity, each note carefully chosen and perfectly placed. Then, without warning, he transitioned seamlessly into Midnight Reflections, but not the way Sterling Heights played it. He reimagined it, adding jazz influences, classical runs, and gospel undertones that transformed the pop song into something transcendent. The tent fell silent. Even Richard's smirk began to fade as Marcus navigated the complex time signatures with ease, his small hands stretching impossibly to reach chords that should have been beyond his grasp. He played with his eyes closed, his body swaying slightly, completely lost in the music. Emma's mouth fell open. Derek stopped chewing his gum. Kyle set down his phone, the video still recording but forgotten. But Richard, his pride stung and his position threatened, wasn't ready to admit what they were all witnessing. As Marcus reached the emotional climax of the piece, Richard abruptly clapped his hands. Okay, that's enough. Very cute. But playing alone in a tent and performing on stage in front of thousands are completely different things. You'd freeze up there. You'd embarrass yourself, us, and this entire festival. Marcus stopped playing, his hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the intensity of the music still flowing through him. I wouldn't freeze, he said quietly. Music isn't about the size of the crowd. It's about the truth in the notes. The truth in the notes? Richard mocked. What fortune cookie did you read that in? He turned to his bandmates. Come on, we're wasting time. Connor will pull through. He has to. As they started to leave, Victoria Chen, the festival coordinator, appeared in the tent entrance. She was a sharp-dressed woman in her 40s who had been running successful festivals for 2 decades. Richard, we need to talk about contingency plans. Connor's been taken to the hospital. Food poisoning has turned into severe dehydration. He's in no condition to perform. Then we'll perform without piano, Richard said stubbornly. Without piano? Victoria raised an eyebrow. Your entire set is built around Connor's arrangements. The tickets were sold with the promise of your full band. We could face lawsuits. We'll figure it out, Richard snapped. Maybe we can get a session musician, at 3 hours' notice? For your complex arrangements? Richard, be realistic. Throughout this exchange, Marcus stood quietly by the piano, his grandmother's hand on his shoulder. Finally, he spoke up once more. I'm still here. I can still help. Richard whirled on him, his frustration boiling over. You know what, kid? You want to embarrass yourself? Fine. Play the opening of Crescendo of Dreams. Note for note. If you can do that, just the opening, I'll consider it. It was a trap, and everyone knew it. Crescendo of Dreams had one of the most technically challenging piano introductions in their entire catalog, a minute-long solo that Connor himself had taken months to master. Marcus sat back down at the piano without hesitation. He took a deep breath, and then his fingers flew across the keys. The introduction poured forth every note perfect, every rhythm precise, every dynamic exactly as recorded. But more than that, he added something Connor's playing had always lacked: soul. The last note of Crescendo of Dreams hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus's flawless performance had rendered everyone speechless except Richard Sterling, whose face had turned an alarming shade of red. The implications were clear. This 12-year-old boy from the wrong side of town had just played their most difficult piece better than their professionally trained pianist. That was... Emma began, but Richard cut her off with a sharp gesture. That was adequate mimicry, he said coldly. Anyone can copy a recording. But performance isn't just about hitting the right notes. It's about presence, professionalism, image. His eyes swept over Marcus's appearance with deliberate disdain. You think our sponsors want to see this on stage? You think the Whitmores, who paid $50,000 for their corporate table, want to watch some random kid in worn-out sneakers? As if summoned by their name, Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore appeared in the tent entrance, their designer clothes and jewelry catching the afternoon light. They were making their rounds, checking on the festival they'd helped finance. Richard. Getting ready for tonight's performance? Mr. Whitmore boomed, then noticed the small crowd. What's happening here? Richard's demeanor changed instantly, becoming charming and deferential. Just a small disruption, Charles. Nothing to worry about. This young man seems to think he can fill in for Connor. Mrs. Whitmore's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose as she took in Marcus and Rose. The janitorial staff's family? She said it like she was identifying a species of insect. Richard, surely you're not actually considering. Of course not, Richard assured them quickly. I was just explaining to the boy that professional music isn't a game. More people had begun to gather, drawn by the commotion. Festival workers, other musicians, early VIP guests, all creating an audience for what was becoming Marcus's public humiliation. Mr. Whitmore laughed, the sound harsh and dismissive. Good God, Richard. Can you imagine? Sterling Heights, featuring random child on piano. Our competitors would have a field day. The festival's reputation would be ruined. Exactly, Richard said, emboldened by the support. He turned back to Marcus, raising his voice so everyone could hear. You see, boy? This isn't about whether you can play a few notes. This is about standards. Excellence. Class. Things you clearly don't understand. Marcus felt his grandmother's hand tighten on his shoulder, felt her trembling with suppressed anger. But it was Marcus who spoke, his young voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. You're right, he said, and Richard's eyes lit up with triumph. But Marcus continued, I don't understand why music should only belong to people who can afford $50,000 tables. I don't understand why talent only counts if it comes with the right clothes or the right address. But most of all, he looked directly at Richard. I don't understand why you're so scared of letting people hear me play. The crowd gasped. Several people pulled out their phones, sensing drama worthy of social media. Richard's face contorted with rage. Scared? Scared? You arrogant little, he caught himself, aware of the recording phones. I'm trying to protect you, kid. You have no idea what it's like up there. The lights, the pressure, thousands of eyes on you. You'd crack in seconds. You'd humiliate yourself and your grandmother. Then let him try, Emma said suddenly. Everyone turned to stare at the bassist. I mean, what's the harm in letting him soundcheck with us? If he fails privately. Emma's got a point, Derek added, surprising everyone. The kid's got chops. Maybe, no. Richard's voice cracked like a whip. We are not discussing this. This is my band, my decision. He turned to the crowd, gesturing dramatically. Would any of you pay premium prices to watch a 12-year-old nobody fumble through professional songs? Would any of you trust your entertainment to someone who learned piano from, what? Sneaking around after hours? He'd said it as a guess, but the way Rose stiffened told him he'd hit close to home. His smile turned predatory. Oh my God, that's it, isn't it? He's been trespassing. Using our equipment without permission. He turned to Victoria Chen. This is a liability issue. This boy and his grandmother have been. Stop. Victoria's voice was calm but firm. Mrs. Thompson is one of our most reliable employees. If Marcus has been in the venue after hours, I'm sure there's an explanation. The explanation is theft of services. Richard was building steam now, playing to his audience. Unauthorized use of professional equipment worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. And now he has the audacity to think that theft qualifies him to perform? The crowd was growing, and opinions were divided. Some looked sympathetic to Marcus, others nodded along with Richard's arguments. The Whitmores were whispering to other VIP guests, their expressions scandalized. Marcus felt tears building behind his eyes, not from sadness, but from frustration. He could feel the music inside him, desperate to be heard, to prove itself. But Richard had turned this into something else, something ugly. You know what? Richard announced to the crowd, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. Let's settle this once and for all. Security. He called to the guards who had gathered to watch. Please escort this boy and his grandmother from the backstage area. They're not authorized to be here. Now wait a minute, Victoria protested. Rose is working, not backstage, she isn't. Her job is maintenance, not harassing the talent with her grandson's delusions. Richard pulled out his phone with theatrical flair. In fact, I think I should call the festival board. They should know their janitor has been allowing her grandson to trespass and use equipment without permission. Rose stepped forward, her dignity intact despite the threat. You can call whoever you want, Mr. Sterling. But my grandson has more musical gift than you'll ever recognize, because you're too blinded by privilege to see it. Come on, Marcus. We're leaving. But as they turned to go, Marcus broke free from his grandmother's grasp and faced Richard one last time. You're not protecting anyone, he said, his young voice carrying surprising authority. You're just afraid. Afraid that if people heard me play, they'd realize that talent doesn't care about money or status. That maybe, just maybe, a kid like me could do something you can't, make people feel the music, not just hear it. Richard stepped closer, using his height to tower over the boy. You know what your problem is? You don't know your place. This isn't some feel-good movie where the poor kid gets to show up the mean rich people. This is real life. And in real life, people like you don't get to play on stages like this. Ever. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Let the kid play." But others countered with Richard's right, and know your place. The Whitmores shook their heads in disgust. Richard, we'll be at our table tonight. We trust you'll have sorted this situation by then. They walked away, their meaning clear: Marcus was not to come near that stage. As security began to guide Marcus and Rose away, phones captured every moment. Marcus didn't struggle or protest. He walked with his head high, even as Richard's voice followed them. That's right, run along. And next time you want to play piano, buy your own instead of sneaking around using ones that don't belong to you. Maybe if your grandmother worked a little harder instead of letting you run wild, you could afford lessons like normal people. The crowd parted as they passed. Some looked sympathetic, others smirked. Marcus heard fragments of conversation. Poor kid. Richard's being harsh. But he's right about standards. Can't just let anyone on stage. Did you see his shoes? Probably from Goodwill. As they reached the edge of the backstage area, Marcus turned back one last time. Richard was surrounded by supporters, laughing now, the threat to his authorities seemingly vanquished. But Marcus noticed something Richard didn't: at least a dozen phones were still recording, and not all the faces behind them looked pleased with what they'd witnessed. Come on, baby, Rose said softly, her own eyes glistening with unshed tears. Let's go home. No, Grandma, Marcus said quietly. You still have work to finish. I'll wait in the janitor's closet like I promised. After all that? Marcus, he doesn't get to win by making us run away, Marcus said with quiet determination. You taught me that dignity isn't about what others think of you. It's about knowing your own worth. As they walked back through the service corridors, neither of them noticed the young woman who had been recording everything from the very beginning. Sarah Mitchell, a journalism student working as a freelance blogger, had captured it all, from Marcus's incredible piano performance to Richard's cruel takedown. Her fingers were already flying across her phone, uploading the video to every social media platform she could think of. The caption she typed would soon be seen by millions. Viral alert: watch this talented 12-year-old boy get destroyed by egotistical rock star for daring to offer help. You won't believe what Sterling Heights Richard Sterling just did to a child. Hashtag let Marcus play, hashtag music elitism, hashtag shameful. Within an hour, the video would have 10,000 views. Within 2 hours, 100,000. By the time Sterling Heights was supposed to take the stage, the number would be in the millions, and Richard Sterling would learn that in the age of social media, cruelty to a child never goes unpunished. In the quiet of the janitor's closet, Marcus sat perfectly still on the small bench, but his fingers never stopped moving. They danced across invisible keys, playing symphonies only he could hear. Rose watched him from the doorway, her heart breaking for the dreams that had just been crushed so publicly. Baby, she said softly, you want to talk about it? Marcus looked up, and to her surprise, his eyes weren't filled with tears but with a strange kind of peace. It's okay, Grandma. He was never going to listen anyway. People like him, they hear with their eyes first. Rose came to sit beside him, pulling him close. When did you get so wise? Mr. Johnson taught me that, Marcus replied, and Rose's breath caught at the mention of the name. Theodore Johnson. The ghost that haunted these halls in the best possible way. He'd been one of the greatest jazz pianists of his generation, playing with legends like Miles Davis and John Coltrane. But age and arthritis had ended his career, and he'd taken a job as night security at the Riverside venue just to stay close to the music. That was how he'd found Marcus. It had started 2 years ago. Rose had been working a late shift, and 8-year-old Marcus had fallen asleep in this very closet. She'd gone to check on him and found his bench empty. Panic had driven her through the empty venue until she'd heard it, piano music so beautiful it made her stop in her tracks. She'd found them in the main hall, Marcus at the Steinway and old Mr. Johnson standing beside him, guiding his small hands across the keys. This boy's got it, Rose, Mr. Johnson had said, his eyes bright with excitement she hadn't seen in years. I've taught hundreds of students at conservatories, played with the best in the world. But this child, he doesn't just play music. He channels it. For 6 months, Mr. Johnson had taught Marcus in secret. After Rose's shifts, after the venue had closed, the old jazz master would spend hours with the boy, teaching him not just technique but the soul of music. Marcus absorbed it all like a sponge, his natural gift refined by one of the masters. Play like you're telling the truth, Mr. Johnson would say. The notes are just words. The music is what happens when you mean them. Then Mr. Johnson had a stroke. He survived but could barely speak, let alone play. He was in a nursing home now, across town. Marcus visited when he could, playing recordings of his practice sessions on Rose's old phone so Mr. Johnson could hear his progress. I wonder what Mr. Johnson would say about today, Marcus mused. Rose pulled out her phone. Why don't we ask him? Marcus's eyes lit up. Could we? Rose dialed the nursing home and asked to be transferred to Mr. Johnson's room. After a moment, a nurse's voice came on. He can't really speak, ma'am, but I can put the phone to his ear. Mr. Johnson? Marcus said into the phone. It's me, Marcus. I tried to play for some people today. Real musicians. But they didn't want to listen. They said I didn't belong. There was silence, then a sound, Mr. Johnson tapping. 1 tap, pause, 2 taps, pause, 3 taps. It was their code, developed after the stroke. 1, 2, 3 meant keep playing. I will, Marcus whispered. I promise. After they hung up, Rose stood. I need to finish my shift. Will you be okay? Marcus nodded, but then they heard commotion outside. Shouting, running feet. Rose opened the door to find security guard James rushing past. James! What's happening? You haven't seen? James pulled out his phone. That video of Marcus and Richard Sterling, it's everywhere. Look. He showed them his screen. The video had been shared by major news outlets, celebrities, and musicians from around the world. The comments were pouring in by the thousands. This broke my heart. That boy is incredibly talented. Richard Sterling is cancelled. How dare he treat a child like that? Someone find this boy and get him on a stage. Sterling Heights just lost a fan forever. Hashtag Let Marcus Play is trending worldwide, James explained. People are threatening to boycott the festival if Marcus doesn't get to perform. Rose's phone began ringing. Unknown numbers, all of them. She let them go to voicemail, but one name made her answer, Victoria Chen. Rose, where are you? We have a situation. The festival's social media is in meltdown. Sponsors are calling. 3 board members have already contacted me. We need to discuss this. Miss Chen, we don't want any trouble. Trouble? Rose, half the internet is demanding we let Marcus play. The other half is defending Richard. We've got news vans pulling up outside. This has become bigger than all of us. Meanwhile, across the venue, Richard Sterling was in his dressing room, watching his career potentially implode on his phone screen. His manager, Tony, was pacing frantically. Richard, this is bad. Really bad. Our label called. Streaming numbers are dropping. People are leaving 1-star reviews on everything. The hashtag Richard Sterling is racist is trending. I'm not racist. Richard exploded. This has nothing to do with race. The kid wasn't qualified. Watch the video, Richard. Watch how it looks. You, a wealthy white musician, publicly humiliating a young black boy who just wanted to help. After he played perfectly, I might add. Richard watched the video for the first time, seeing himself from the outside. The sneer on his face, the way he'd towered over Marcus, the cruel words. But what struck him most was Marcus's dignity in the face of it all, and the pain in the boy's eyes that he'd been too angry to see in person. The kid was good, wasn't he? Derek said from the doorway. The rest of the band stood behind him. Damn good, Kyle added. Maybe better than Connor on that crescendo intro. Emma stepped forward. Richard, we've been talking. We think you should apologize. Make this right. Apologize? For maintaining professional standards? For being a bully, Emma said bluntly. That's what the world saw. A grown man bullying a child. Back in the janitor's closet, Marcus was writing in a notebook, not words, but musical notation. He was composing, as he always did when emotions overwhelmed him. The piece was dark at first, full of the hurt and frustration of the day. But gradually, it transformed into something hopeful, triumphant even. "What are you writing, baby?" Rose asked. "A song for Mr. Johnson," Marcus replied. "For when he gets better. So he can hear that I didn't give up." Rose's phone rang again. This time it was a number she recognized, the local news station. "Mrs. Thompson? This is Channel 7 News. We're here at the festival, and we'd love to interview you and Marcus about what happened today." "We're not interested in..." "Ma'am, before you say no, you should know that several prominent musicians have seen the video and are offering to mentor Marcus. The Detroit Symphony Orchestra has expressed interest. 3 record labels have called. This could change everything for your grandson." Rose looked at Marcus, still writing his composition, lost in the world of music that no amount of cruelty could take from him. "He doesn't want fame," Rose said. "He just wants to play." "Then let him play, ma'am. The whole world wants to hear him now." As the sun began to set over the Riverside Festival, the atmosphere was electric with controversy. The audience filing in was divided, some wearing hastily made "Let Marcus Play" t-shirts, others defending Sterling Heights. The tension was palpable. And in the janitor's closet, a 12-year-old boy continued to write music, unaware that his simple request to help had sparked a conversation about talent, prejudice, and who gets to decide who belongs on which stage. The night was far from over, and the real performance hadn't even begun. By 6 p.m., 3 hours before Sterling Heights was scheduled to perform, the video had reached 5 million views and climbing. News vans surrounded the Riverside Festival venue like an army laying siege. The hashtag Let Marcus Play had spawned thousands of posts, memes, and response videos from musicians around the world. Sarah Mitchell, the young journalist who'd posted the original video, stood in front of a CNN camera, adjusting her microphone. She'd gone from unknown blogger to the most sought-after witness in the country within hours. "I couldn't believe what I was seeing," Sarah told the reporter. This young boy played with such skill and passion, and instead of recognizing his talent, Richard Sterling chose to humiliate him. It wasn't just about music, it was about power, class, and frankly, race. Inside his tour bus, Richard Sterling watched the interview with growing panic. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing. His publicist had called 15 times. His mother had texted, "Raised you better than this. Fix it." "Richard, we need a statement," Tony insisted. "The longer we wait, the worse this gets." "What am I supposed to say? That I was wrong? That some random kid should headline with us? Maybe start with an apology?" Emma suggested from across the bus. The band had been giving Richard the cold shoulder since the incident. "You're all acting like I kicked a puppy. I maintained professional standards. You called him the help's child," Derek interrupted. "On camera. That's what people are reacting to." Meanwhile, the festival grounds had become a battleground of opinions. Protesters had gathered at the main entrance with signs, "Music has no color, talent over privilege, let all children dream." Counter-protesters, mostly wealthy season ticket holders, held their own signs, "Maintain standards, professional venues for professionals." Inside the venue, Victoria Chen was in crisis mode. The festival board had called an emergency meeting via video conference. "This is a disaster," board president Harold Morrison declared from his screen. "Our sponsors are panicking. Pepsi is threatening to pull their funding. Nike wants a statement about our inclusion policies." "But sir," Victoria argued, "if we force Richard to include Marcus, we set a precedent, and if we don't, we look like elitist racists," another board member interrupted. "Have you seen what they're calling us on Twitter? Riverside Festival, where dreams go to die is trending." Back in the janitor's closet, Rose tried to shield Marcus from the chaos, but it was impossible. Their small sanctuary had been discovered. Festival workers kept stopping by to offer support or share updates. Marcus had given up trying to compose, the noise and disruption too much. "Grandma, maybe we should just go home," he said quietly. Before Rose could respond, her phone rang with a FaceTime call. The number was international. Against her better judgment, she answered. The face that appeared on screen made Marcus gasp. It was Alicia Keys, one of his musical heroes. "Is this Marcus?" Alicia asked, her famous smile warm and encouraging. How?" Marcus stammered. "I saw the video, sweetie. The whole world has. And I wanted to tell you something important. Don't let anyone dim your light. You have a gift, and nobody has the right to tell you where you can or can't share it." "But he said I don't belong. Baby, I've been where you are. People told me I was too young, too this, too that. You know what I did? I played anyway. I played until they had no choice but to listen. And from what I saw in that video, you've got something special. Don't give up." After she hung up, Marcus sat in stunned silence. Then Rose's phone rang again. And again. Questlove. John Legend. Even Sir Elton John called from London, offering words of encouragement and disbelief at Richard's behavior. The support wasn't limited to celebrities. Regular people began gathering outside the janitor's closet, having figured out where Marcus was. Parents with their children, young musicians, elderly jazz fans, all wanting to show support. One old man pushed through the crowd. "I taught music for 40 years, he said to Rose. "If your grandson wants to practice on my piano, he's welcome anytime. No charge. Ever." A young woman handed Marcus a card. "I'm with the Youth Symphony. We'd love to have you audition. Actually, forget the audition. You're in if you want." The crowd grew so large that security had to create a barrier. But through it all, Richard Sterling's words echoed in Marcus's mind, "People like you don't get to play on stages like this." At 7 p.m., Tony burst into Richard's dressing room. "It's over. The label called. Either you make this right, or they're dropping Sterling Heights. The board says the same. You have 1 hour to fix this, or you're banned from the festival. For life." Richard's hands shook as he held his phone. His Instagram had lost 100,000 followers. His latest single had dropped off the iTunes chart. Spotify streams were plummeting. His entire world was crumbling because he'd been cruel to a 12-year-old boy. "What do you want me to do?" he asked desperately. "What you should have done from the start," Emma said. "Listen to him play. Give him a chance. Make this right." In the janitor's closet, Victoria Chen appeared with a proposal. "Marcus, the board has agreed. If you're willing, you can perform one song with Sterling Heights tonight. It would calm the situation and..." "No," Marcus said firmly, surprising everyone. "Not like this. Not because of pressure or protests or videos. Music shouldn't be about that." "But baby," Rose said gently, "this is your chance." "My chance should have been when I asked," Marcus replied. "When I offered to help because their pianist was sick. Not because the internet is angry. Mr. Johnson taught me that music has to come from the right place. This doesn't feel right." Victoria's phone buzzed. She read the message and her face went pale. "Connor just called from the hospital. He's seen the video. He's insisting that Marcus play his parts tonight. He says, and I quote, that kid plays my arrangements better than I do. Richard's an idiot if he doesn't let him." The crowd outside the closet had grown silent, everyone straining to hear Marcus's response. The boy looked at his grandmother, then at the expectant faces, then down at his hands, the hands that had played thousands of hours in secret, preparing for a moment he never thought would come. "If I play," Marcus said slowly, "it's not to prove Richard wrong or make him look bad. It's not for the cameras or the protests. If I play, it's for Mr. Johnson, who believed in me. For my grandma, who never stopped me from dreaming. And for every kid who's been told they don't belong somewhere because of how they look or where they come from. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Marcus wasn't finished. But I have conditions. Mr. Sterling has to ask me himself. Not his manager, not the board. Him. And he has to mean it. Word of Marcus's conditions reached Richard within minutes. The singer stood in his dressing room, staring at his reflection. The man looking back at him wasn't the rock star he'd cultivated for years. It was someone he didn't recognize, someone ugly, petty, and small. His phone buzzed with a text from his daughter in college. "Dad, I'm ashamed of you. The man in that video isn't the father who taught me to be kind to everyone. Fix this." Richard Sterling, for the first time in years, felt tears in his eyes. He'd become everything he'd once promised himself he'd never be: a bully, a gatekeeper, someone who crushed dreams instead of nurturing them. He stood up, straightened his designer jacket, and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Tony asked. "To do something I should have done hours ago," Richard replied. "To listen. Really listen." As he walked through the venue toward the janitor's closet, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. Phones came out, recording every step. The world was watching to see if Richard Sterling could swallow his pride and do the right thing, or if he'd double down on his cruelty. The viral storm had brought them to this moment. Now, it was up to two people, a proud man and a talented boy, to decide what would happen next. Richard Sterling's walk through the festival grounds felt like the longest journey of his life. Every step was documented by hundreds of phones, their cameras tracking his movement like eyes of judgment. The crowds murmuring followed him, some hostile, others curious, all waiting to see what the infamous rock star would do. As he approached the service area where the janitor's closet was located, his manager Tony caught up with him. "Richard, wait. Think about what you're going to say. The whole world is watching." "That's the problem, Tony. I've been thinking too much about who's watching and not enough about what's right." The crowd around the janitor's closet parted as Richard approached. Security guards looked uncertain. Should they let him through? Victoria Chen nodded, and they stepped aside. Richard found himself face to face with the door of a small, cramped closet that smelled of cleaning supplies. Through the gap under the door, he could see light and shadows moving. He raised his hand to knock, then hesitated. This was it, the moment where he either salvaged his career and reputation or admitted he'd been completely, utterly wrong. He knocked. "Come in," Rose's voice called. Richard opened the door to find Marcus sitting on the small bench, his notebook of compositions in his lap. Rose stood protectively beside him. The closet was barely big enough for the three of them. May I come in?" Richard asked, his usual commanding voice reduced to something almost humble. Rose looked at Marcus, who nodded slightly. Richard entered, having to duck his head in the small space. For the first time, he truly saw how the other half lived, this tiny closet where Marcus had spent countless hours while his grandmother worked, dreaming of music while surrounded by mops and buckets. "Marcus," Richard began, then stopped. The prepared speech he'd been formulating evaporated. "I owe you an apology." Marcus looked up at him with those same steady eyes that had unnerved him earlier. "Do you mean it? Or are you just saying it because your career is in trouble?" The directness of the question hit Richard like a punch. He took a breath. "Both, if I'm honest. But also, when I watched that video, I saw myself from the outside. And I didn't like what I saw." "You saw what everyone else saw," Rose said coldly. "A grown man bullying a child." "Yes," Richard admitted. "I saw that. But I also saw something else. I saw myself becoming everything I swore I'd never be when I started in music." He sat down on an overturned bucket, bringing himself to Marcus's eye level. "When I was starting out, I was playing in subway stations. People like me now wouldn't give me the time of day. They said I didn't belong in real venues. And when I finally made it, I promised myself I'd never be like them. But somewhere along the way, you became them," Marcus finished quietly. "Yeah. I became them. Richard's voice cracked slightly. Connor called me from the hospital. He said you play his parts better than he does. My own band thinks I'm an ass. My daughter's ashamed of me. And you know what the worst part is? They're all right. The small closet fell silent except for the distant noise of the crowd outside. What do you want from me? Marcus asked. I need you to play tonight. Not just for my career, though I won't lie, that's part of it. But because. Richard struggled for the words. Because you were right. Music doesn't care about money or status. And if I keep you off that stage, I'm everything people are saying I am. You want me to save your reputation, Marcus said. It wasn't a question. No, Richard said, surprising himself with his honesty. My reputation is shot no matter what. I want you to play because you deserve to. Because you're talented. Because I was wrong. Marcus studied him for a long moment. If I play, things have to change. What kind of things? The festival needs to start a program for kids who can't afford music lessons. Kids from neighborhoods like mine. Richard blinked. The kid was negotiating. I can talk to the board about that. No. You'll do more than talk. You'll fund it. Personally. That could cost. How much did your car cost? Marcus interrupted. The Ferrari I saw in the parking lot? Richard flushed. 300,000. That could pay for a lot of kids to learn music. The crowd outside had gone completely silent, everyone straining to hear. Someone was live streaming, holding their phone up to the small window. Okay, Richard said. I'll fund it. What else? Mr. Johnson, my teacher, needs better care. The nursing home he's in, it's not good. I'll handle it, Richard said without hesitation. Best facility in the state. What else? Marcus looked at his grandmother. My grandma gets a raise. A big one. And she's not the help. She's staff, with respect and benefits. Done. Anything else? Marcus stood up, barely reaching Richard's shoulder even with the man sitting. When I play tonight, I'm not playing for you. I'm not your token apology. I'm a musician, and you'll treat me like one. Richard stood as well, extending his hand. You're a better musician than I deserve to share a stage with. And a better person than I've been in years. Marcus looked at the extended hand, then shook it. The crowd outside erupted in cheers. We have 90 minutes, Richard said. We need to rehearse. The songs, I know them all, Marcus said simply. But I have one more condition. Richard's heart sank. What? I want to play one of my own compositions. Something I wrote. Marcus, the audience is expecting. They're expecting music, Marcus interrupted. Real music. Not just the hits they know. If you want me to save your show, then let me show them what music really is. Richard looked at this 12-year-old boy who had more integrity in his little finger than Richard had shown in years. Okay. One original composition. Where in the set? I'll know when the moment's right, Marcus said. As they prepared to leave the closet, Rose grabbed Richard's arm. If you hurt my boy again, if you embarrass him out there or make him feel small, no amount of money or apologies will save you from what I'll do to you. Understood? Richard nodded. Understood. But Mrs. Thompson. Rose. I won't hurt him. He's about to show me and everyone else what we've been missing. They emerged from the closet to thunderous applause and a sea of phone cameras. The live stream had captured everything. Hashtag Marcus and Richard makeup was already trending. Victoria Chan rushed over. We need to get to sound check immediately. The crowd is getting restless. Half of them are here for the drama now, not just the music. As they walked toward the stage, Richard's bandmates fell in step beside them. Emma smiled at Marcus. "You ready for this, kid?" "I'd been ready my whole life," Marcus replied. "I just didn't know it until today." Derek ruffled Marcus's hair. "You're gonna kill it out there." Kyle added, "Connor sent over his personal notations. But something tells me you won't need them." The backstage area that had been the site of Marcus's humiliation hours earlier now became his pathway to vindication. The same people who had witnessed his rejection now watched his return. The Whitmores stood near their VIP table, their expressions sour. "Richard, this is highly irregular," Mr. Whitmore called out. "We paid for professionals. You paid for music," Richard shot back, finding his spine. "And you're about to get the best performance of your life. If you don't like it, I'll refund your table personally." As they reached the stage, Marcus saw it, the Steinway Model D, gleaming under the lights. The piano he'd played in secret so many times, now waiting for him in front of 20,000 people. "Scared?" Richard asked, remembering his earlier taunts about stage fright. Marcus looked out at the massive crowd, at the sea of faces all waiting to see if the viral video boy could really play. "No," he said simply. "This is just another room with a piano in it. The music doesn't change." Richard felt something shift in his chest, respect, genuine and deep. "Kid." "Marcus. I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry." "I know," Marcus said. "Now let's show them what music really sounds like." As they took their positions for sound check, the crowd fell silent. 20,000 people held their breath, waiting to see if this unlikely partnership would create magic or disaster. Marcus sat at the piano, adjusted the bench just as Mr. Johnson had taught him, and placed his hands on the keys. The first note rang out clear and true, echoing across the festival grounds. And in that moment, everyone knew they were about to witness something extraordinary. The sound check was supposed to be routine, a quick run-through of the opening numbers to ensure all the equipment was working properly. But as Marcus's fingers touched the keys for the first piece, Silver Lining, something extraordinary happened. The stagehands stopped their work. The security guards turned to watch. Even the vendors at the far edges of the venue paused in their sales. Marcus wasn't just playing the notes, he was reimagining them. Where Connor's version was technically perfect but safe, Marcus added subtle jazz inflections, gospel runs, and classical flourishes that transformed the pop song into something transcendent. His left hand created bass lines that Connor had never imagined, while his right hand danced through melodies that seemed to tell stories. "Holy!" Derek whispered from behind his drum kit. "Are you hearing this?" Richard stood frozen at his microphone. He'd performed Silver Lining hundreds of times, but hearing it like this, it was like discovering the song had been incomplete all along, waiting for this 12-year-old boy to reveal its true potential. Should I sing?" Richard asked uncertainly. Marcus glanced up from the piano, his fingers never stopping. From the second verse. "Let me establish the theme first." The professional musicians exchanged glances. The kid was directing them. And somehow, it felt right. As Marcus reached the second verse, he nodded to Richard, who began to sing. But something had changed in Richard's voice too. The arrogance was gone, replaced by vulnerability. He was actually feeling the lyrics for the first time in years. "I thought I had it all figured out, standing tall while others fell down, but pride comes before the fall, they say, and I'm falling now, falling now." The small crowd that had gathered for sound check, mostly VIP ticket holders and media, began recording. This wasn't just a sound check, it was a revelation. Emma stepped forward with her bass, finding Marcus's rhythm immediately. Kyle's guitar joined next, then Derek's drums. The band that had performed together for 5 years suddenly sounded brand new, energized by the fresh interpretation Marcus brought to their music. "Stop, stop," a voice called from the side of the stage. It was Harold Morrison, the board president, with several other board members. "This is highly irregular. The boy hasn't been approved by our insurance, our legal team." "Harold," Victoria Chin interrupted, "listen to them. Just listen. The band had continued playing despite the interruption, moving into midnight reflections. Marcus navigated the complex time signatures as if they were simple scales, but more than that, he made them make sense. What had always been a technically impressive but emotionally cold showcase became a journey through sound. Mr. Whitmore and his wife had approached the stage, their earlier disdain wavering. "Is that really the same song?" Mrs. Whitmore asked her husband. From the sound engineering booth, the head technician was frantically adjusting levels. "This kid's dynamic range is insane," he muttered to his assistant. "He goes from whispersoft to thunder without losing clarity. How is that possible?" As they reached the bridge of the song, Marcus did something unexpected. He began to hum along with his playing, not words, just a melodic line that seemed to pull the entire arrangement together. It was hauntingly beautiful. "Where did you learn to do that?" Richard asked during a brief musical interlude. "Mr. Johnson taught me," Marcus replied, his fingers never stopping. He said music is meant to be felt, not just heard. Sometimes you have to show people how to feel it. In the VIP section, a woman in her 60s stood up suddenly. Isabella Cruz, the legendary jazz pianist who was scheduled to perform a special guest set later, had been watching from her table. "Who is this child?" she demanded of anyone who would listen. "This is not normal talent. This is generational." Her pronouncement carried weight. Isabella Cruz didn't give compliments lightly. She'd been critical of modern music for years, claiming it lacked soul. But here was a 12-year-old boy proving her wrong, or perhaps proving her right about what music could be. The sound check was supposed to last 30 minutes. They were approaching an hour, and no one wanted it to end. With each song, Marcus revealed new depths to Sterling Heights' catalog. He found the hidden melodies, the suppressed emotions, the potential that had always existed but never been realized. "Can we do Crescendo of Dreams?" Kyle asked. "The full version?" Marcus nodded, and what followed was 7 minutes of musical perfection. He played Connor's part, but also added complementary melodies that Connor had never conceived. During Richard's guitar solo, Marcus didn't just comp behind him, he engaged in a musical conversation, each instrument speaking to the other. "This is what we've been missing," Emma said, tears streaming down her face. "This is what we were supposed to sound like all along." The crowd for sound check had grown from dozens to hundreds, with more people abandoning their dinner reservations to witness what was happening on stage. Word was spreading through the festival grounds, something magical was happening. But it was Marcus's demeanor that was most remarkable. He wasn't showing off or seeking attention. He was simply playing, lost in the music, occasionally offering quiet suggestions to the band. "Derek, try hitting the snare on the upbeat there. Emma, what if you walked the bass line down instead of up? Mr. Sterling, that high note would be more powerful if you approached it from below." Each suggestion was delivered with humility but confidence, and each one made the music better. "Where's your sheet music?" Richard finally asked, realizing Marcus hadn't looked at a single note. "Here," Marcus tapped his temple, then his heart. "And here." As they neared the end of sound check, Marcus raised his hand. "Can I try something?" "Anything," Richard said, meaning it. Marcus began to play something no one recognized. It was an original composition, complex and beautiful, with influences from jazz, classical, gospel, and blues. But as it developed, the band began to hear familiar themes he was weaving in melodies from their songs, creating a medley that told a story. The story of a boy who dreamed of music. Who practiced in secret. Who faced rejection. Who found hope. "This is what you wrote in the closet today," Rose gasped from the side of the stage. Marcus nodded, never stopping. The piece built to a crescendo that required him to use every bit of his reach, every ounce of his skill. The Steinway sang under his hands, its voice carrying across the entire venue. When the last note faded, there was absolute silence. Then, like a dam breaking, the crowd erupted. The hundreds who had gathered were on their feet, cheering, many crying. Isabella Cruz made her way to the stage. Young man, she said, her voice carrying the authority of decades of excellence, I have played with the greatest musicians of our time. I have never heard anyone your age play with such maturity and soul. Would you do me the honor of playing a duet during my set? Marcus's eyes went wide. You want me to play with you? I want to learn from you, she corrected. Richard Sterling stood at his microphone, watching the recognition Marcus was receiving, the recognition he'd tried to deny just hours ago. But instead of jealousy, he felt something else, gratitude. This boy was saving more than his career, he was saving his soul. Marcus, Richard said, loud enough for everyone to hear, I was wrong. So completely wrong. You don't just belong on this stage belongs to you. Will you do us the honor of opening the show? Solo. Just you and the piano. Let them hear what music really is before we come out. The crowd gasped. The opening was the most coveted spot, usually reserved for the biggest names. But Richard was right, after what they just witnessed, anything else would be anticlimactic. Marcus looked at his grandmother, who nodded through her tears. He looked at the band, who were all smiling encouragingly. He looked at the crowd, waiting expectantly. Okay, he said simply. But I'm playing for Mr. Johnson. So he knows I kept my promise. As the sound check ended and the crowd dispersed to spread the word, the anticipation for the night's performance reached fever pitch. The boy who'd been told he didn't belong was about to open for the very band that had rejected him. But more than that, Marcus Thompson was about to show 20,000 people what happened when talent met opportunity, when dreams met reality, when a boy who'd learned piano in secret finally got to play in the light. The sun had set completely, and the Riverside Festival was electric with anticipation. 20,000 people had packed the venue, but tonight's crowd was different. Mixed among the usual affluent festival goers were people from Marcus's neighborhood, members of the local community who had scraped together money or received donated tickets from sympathizers who'd seen the viral video. The divide that usually existed at such events had blurred. Backstage, Marcus stood in a small dressing room that had been hastily arranged for him. Rose was adjusting his shirt, not a designer outfit, but his best clean shirt, pressed with love and care. You don't have to do this, baby, she said softly. You've already proven everything you needed to prove. I'm not trying to prove anything anymore, Grandma, Marcus replied. I just want to play. For everyone who never gets the chance. A knock at the door interrupted them. Richard entered, holding a garment bag. Marcus, I wanted to give you this. No obligations, just, if you want it. Inside was a beautiful black suit, perfectly sized for Marcus. Not flashy or covered in sequins like stage clothes, but elegant and simple. How did you? I had my assistant run out. I guessed your size. You don't have to wear it. It's perfect, Marcus said, genuinely touched. Thank you. As Richard turned to leave, Marcus called out, Mr. Sterling? Are you nervous? Richard laughed, but it wasn't mocking. Terrified. I've never performed after someone who's about to upstage me so completely. But you know what? I'm okay with it. At 8:45 p.m., Victoria Chin took the stage. The crowd's roar was deafening. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's performance will begin with a special solo presentation. Please welcome to the Riverside Festival stage, Marcus Thompson. The crowd erupted. Half cheering wildly, some booing, the Whitmore's table among them, others simply curious about what they were about to witness. Marcus walked onto the stage, looking small against the massive backdrop. The Steinway waited for him, spotlit like a beacon. He could hear everything, the cheers, the jeers, the skeptical murmurs. But as he sat down at the piano bench, it all faded away. He thought of Mr. Johnson, probably listening on the radio the nursing home. He thought of his mother, who had died when he was 6 but had always sung to him. He thought of all the nights he'd snuck into this venue, playing in the dark. Marcus placed his hands on the keys and began. The first piece was his own composition, the one he'd written for Mr. Johnson. It began with a single note, repeated, like a heartbeat. Then another joined it, then another, building slowly. The melody that emerged was both mournful and hopeful, telling the story of dreams deferred but not destroyed. The crowd, which had been restless, fell completely silent. 20,000 people held their collective breath as this 12-year-old boy painted pictures with sound. The composition moved through movements like a classical piece, from the lonely nights practicing in secret, represented by sparse, echoing notes, to the joy of discovery when Mr. Johnson had found him, portrayed through cascading runs that sounded like laughter. There was a section of discord, today's humiliation, but it resolved into something stronger, more determined. When he reached the crescendo, Marcus did something unprecedented. He began to speak while playing, his young voice carrying through the microphone attached to the piano. Mr. Johnson taught me that music is truth. That every note tells a story. This is my story. But it's also the story of every kid who's been told they don't belong somewhere. We do belong. Our dreams matter. Our voices deserve to be heard. The music swelled, and Marcus's hands flew across the keys with such speed and precision that the camera operators struggled to keep up. The piece climaxed with a series of chords that seemed impossible for hands his size to play, but he managed it, his whole body involved in the performance. When the last note rang out, there was a moment of absolute silence. Then the dam broke. The standing ovation was immediate and universal. Even the Whitmores were on their feet, Mrs. Whitmore wiping tears from her eyes. People who had never cared about piano music found themselves moved to their cores. But Marcus wasn't done. As the applause continued, he began to play again, this time, a reimagined version of Crescendo of Dreams. Without the band, he had to carry all the parts himself, and he did so brilliantly. His left hand became the bass and drums, his right the guitar and melody. He even hummed the vocal line at key moments. From the side of the stage, Sterling Heights watched in awe. "He's playing all our parts," Derek whispered. "By himself. And it sounds complete." The audience was mesmerized. Those who had come expecting to see a viral video novelty were witnessing something else entirely, the emergence of a genuine prodigy. After Crescendo of Dreams, Marcus paused. "This next song," he said into the microphone, "is for my grandma. She worked here for 15 years, cleaning up after concerts, making sure this place was ready for the music. Nobody ever thanked her. This is my thank you." He launched into a gospel-influenced piece that had the crowd clapping along. It was joyful, celebratory, full of life. Rose, watching from the wings, sobbed openly. Security guard James put his arm around her shoulders. "That's your grandson out there," he said. "That's your boy showing them all." The solo set was supposed to be 15 minutes. Marcus played for 30, and no one wanted it to end. He played jazz standards with new arrangements. He played classical pieces with modern twists. He played pop songs stripped down to their emotional cores. Then, for his final solo piece, Marcus did something that would be talked about for years. He asked for the house lights to be turned up. "I want to see you," he said to the audience. "All of you. Because this isn't about me. It's about us. All of us who love music. Will you help me with this last one?" He began to play Lean on Me, the Bill Withers classic. Simple, beautiful, universal. And he invited the crowd to sing along. 20,000 voices joined together, led by a 12-year-old boy who had been told he didn't belong. Rich and poor, black and white, young and old, all united in song. The cameras captured it all, the teenage girl crying as she sang, the elderly man swaying with his wife, the Whitmores holding hands and singing with everyone else. Even Richard Sterling, watching from backstage, found himself singing, tears streaming down his face. "This is what music is supposed to do," he said to his bandmates. "Bring people together." And I almost stopped it from happening. As the song ended, Marcus stood and bowed. The ovation lasted 5 full minutes. Chants of Marcy US. Marcy US echoed through the night. Finally, Marcus spoke one more time. "Thank you for listening. Thank you for giving me a chance." And now, please welcome Sterling Heights. As he started to leave the stage, Richard grabbed the microphone. No, Marcus. Stay. Play with us. Please. The crowd roared approval. Marcus looked uncertain. This is your stage now too, Richard said. We'd be honored if you'd share it with us. Marcus walked back to the piano, and Sterling Heights took their positions. But this wasn't the same band that had performed hundreds of times before. This was something new, something better. As they launched into their set, with Marcus's piano leading the way, something magical happened. The music they created together was unlike anything anyone had heard before. It was the sound of barriers breaking, of prejudices crumbling, of music doing what it did best, revealing truth and creating beauty. Isabella Cruz, watching from her VIP table, turned to her manager. Cancel my tour dates. I want to work with that boy. He's the future of music. In the crowd, Sarah Mitchell was already writing her follow-up article, From Humiliation to Standing Ovation, How Marcus Thompson Changed Music in One Night. But the most important audience member wasn't there in person. In a nursing home across town, Theodore Johnson lay in his bed, a radio held close to his ear, tears rolling down his weathered cheeks as he listened to his student, the boy he'd discovered playing in the dark, finally playing in the light where he belonged. The collaboration between Marcus and Sterling Heights had transformed into something nobody expected. What should have been a standard rock concert became a musical conversation between generations, styles, and worlds that rarely intersected. With each song, the synergy grew stronger, the sound richer, the crowd more entranced. But the true moment of transformation came during Phoenix Rising, Sterling Heights' most ambitious piece, a 9-minute opus that Connor had always struggled with due to its demanding piano requirements. Marcus not only played Connor's parts but elevated them, adding layers that complemented Richard's vocals in ways that made the singer's voice soar to new heights. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard announced as the song ended, his voice thick with emotion, I need to say something. Earlier today, I made the biggest mistake of my career, no, of my life. I let prejudice and pride blind me to extraordinary talent. Marcus Thompson isn't just filling in tonight. He's showing us what we've been missing. The crowd responded with thunderous approval. The livestream viewers had grown to over 1 million, with comments flooding in from around the world. Musicians, celebrities, and ordinary people were all witnessing this moment of redemption and revelation. Marcus, Richard continued, turning to the young pianist, would you honor us with another one of your compositions? The full piece this time? Marcus looked out at the sea of faces, 20,000 strong, all waiting. He thought about saying no, about keeping his most personal music private. But then he spotted something in the crowd, a group of kids from his neighborhood, holding handmade signs that read Marcus is our hero and dreams come true. This piece, Marcus said into the microphone, his young voice carrying surprising authority, is called When the Dawn Breaks. I wrote it after my mother died. She used to tell me that no matter how dark the night gets, dawn always comes. You just have to keep playing until the light finds you. The opening notes were so soft that the audience leaned forward, straining to hear. It began with a simple melody in the upper register, lonely and searching. Then his left hand joined, creating a counter melody that seemed to chase the first, never quite catching it, like a child chasing a memory. As the piece developed, Sterling Heights members found themselves drawn in. Without planning, Emma began adding subtle bass notes that supported Marcus's left hand. Derek used brushes on his snare, creating a whisper of rhythm. Kyle added atmospheric guitar effects that sounded like wind or whispered voices. They weren't overwhelming Marcus's composition, they were becoming part of it, following his lead with an intuition that surprised them all. The piece moved through distinct emotional passages, grief represented by dissonant chords that resolved into acceptance, anger expressed through thunderous runs that softened into understanding. When Marcus reached the section representing hope, something extraordinary happened. Isabella Cruz, unable to remain in her seat, had made her way to the stage. Without asking, she sat at the second piano that had been set up for her later performance. She began playing a complementary part, improvising in perfect harmony with Marcus's melody. Two pianists, separated by 50 years in age, united by their love of music. The crowd gasped at the unexpected collaboration. Isabella and Marcus had never played together before, had never even met until tonight, yet they moved together as if they'd been performing duets for years. When Marcus would ascend the keys, Isabella would descend. When he played staccato, she responded with legato. It was a musical conversation between master and prodigy. "Are you getting this?" a cameraman whispered urgently to his director. "Every second of this?" The piece built toward its climax, the dawn finally breaking. Marcus's hands moved with impossible speed and precision, the melody transforming from darkness to light, from sorrow to joy. Isabella matched him note for note, their four hands creating a symphony on two pianos. Then, in the final movement, Marcus did something that would become legendary in music history. He began incorporating melodies from the crowd, the lullaby a mother was humming to her child, the gospel hymn an elderly man was quietly singing, the pop song a teenager had been whistling. He was literally playing the audience's music back to them, weaving their sounds into his composition. Richard Sterling, standing at his microphone with nothing to sing, found himself overwhelmed. This 12-year-old boy wasn't just playing music, he was conducting a spiritual experience, turning 20,000 strangers into a single, unified organism breathing with the rhythm of his playing. When the final chord rang out, a perfect major seventh that seemed to contain all the hope in the world, the silence that followed was sacred. Nobody wanted to break it. Nobody wanted to admit it was over. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, a single voice called out, "Thank you, Marcus." It opened the floodgates. The applause wasn't just loud, it was cathartic. People were crying, hugging strangers, raising their children on their shoulders so they could see the boy at the piano who had just changed their understanding of what music could be. Isabella Cruz stood from her piano and walked to Marcus. In full view of everyone, this legend of jazz bent down and kissed the boy's forehead. "In 60 years of playing," she said into the microphone, "I have never experienced anything like that. Marcus Thompson, you are not the future of music. You are its present, and we are all students in your classroom." From the VIP section, Mr. Whitmore stood up. The same man who hours earlier had called Marcus a charity case now had tears streaming down his face. "Young man," he called out, his voice cracking, "I owe you an apology. I owe everyone an apology. I've been a patron of the arts for 30 years, and I've been looking at everything wrong. Art isn't about pedigree or credentials. It's about this. What you just gave us." Mrs. Whitmore joined her husband. "We'd like to fully fund the music program you mentioned. Not just for a year, but permanently. Every child who wants to learn music should have the chance." The crowd erupted again. The moment was being broadcast live on news channels now, as what had started as a viral controversy had become a cultural phenomenon. But Marcus wasn't done. He stood from the piano and walked to the microphone. "Thank you," he said simply. "But I need to ask something. Mr. Johnson, my teacher, is listening from his nursing home. He can't be here because he had a stroke. But none of this would be possible without him. He found me playing in the dark and taught me to play in the light." He paused, looking directly at one of the cameras. "Mr. Johnson, this is for you. Can everyone help me?" Marcus began clapping slowly, rhythmically. 20,000 people joined in, creating a thunderous rhythm that could be heard for miles. It was a standing ovation for a man who wasn't there, a teacher who had given everything to pass on his gift. In his nursing home bed, Theodore Johnson heard the applause meant for him. The nurse holding the radio to his ear watched as tears flowed freely down his face. With tremendous effort, he managed to tap his finger against the bed rail. 1, 2, 3. "Keep playing." Back at the festival, Richard Sterling approached the microphone. "Marcus Thompson has taught me something tonight. Music isn't about who you are or where you come from. It's about what you have to say and whether you're brave enough to say it. Marcus, would you and Sterling Heights like to make this arrangement permanent? Will you record with us? Tour with us? Teach us?" The crowd held its breath. This was unprecedented, a major band asking a 12-year-old to join them. Marcus looked at his grandmother, who was crying too hard to speak but nodding encouragingly. He looked at the band, all smiling hopefully. He looked at the crowd, waiting for his answer. "I'm 12, Marcus said, causing laughter. "I have school. I have homework. But, if we can work around that, and if we can use the platform to help other kids like me, then yes." The celebration that followed was deafening. Confetti cannons went off, nobody knew who authorized them, but nobody cared. The festival had become a party, a celebration not just of music but of possibility. As the show continued, now with Marcus as an official member for the night, something beautiful happened. The rigid social boundaries that typically defined the Riverside Festival dissolved. VIP ticket holders danced with general admission attendees. The Whitmores were seen hugging Rose Thompson. Children were lifted onto shoulders to see better. "This," Victoria Chen said to her assistant, watching from the production booth, "is what music is supposed to do. Unite, not divide." The final song of the night was, fittingly, a collaboration. Marcus began playing a melody he'd composed on the spot, and one by one, Sterling Heights joined in. Then Isabella Cruz returned to the stage with her band. Other festival performers who had been watching from backstage came out with their instruments. What followed was a 13-minute jam session that would later be released as a charity single, with all proceeds going to music education for underprivileged youth. It was chaotic and beautiful, structured and free, a perfect representation of what can happen when barriers fall and music is allowed to flow freely. As the last note faded and the house lights came up, Marcus stood at the center of the stage, surrounded by professional musicians who all looked at him with respect and admiration. The boy who had been told he didn't belong had become the heart of the biggest musical moment of the year. But for Marcus, the best moment came when he looked to the wings and saw his grandmother standing next to security guard James, both beaming with pride. He had kept his promise, to her, to Mr. Johnson, and to himself. He had played his truth, and the world had finally listened. 3 months after the Riverside Festival, Marcus Thompson sat in a professional recording studio for the first time, but it didn't feel alien or intimidating. It felt like home. The Steinway Grandin Studio A had become his friend, its keys familiar beneath his fingers. Through the glass, he could see Richard Sterling and the rest of Sterling Heights, all wearing headphones, ready to record their first track of their new album, an album that would feature Marcus as a full collaborator. "Okay, Marcus," the producer's voice came through the speakers. "We're rolling. Dawn's Promise, take 1." Marcus began to play, but this wasn't the same boy who had snuck into venues to practice. This was a young artist who had found his voice and his place. The music that flowed from his fingers was confident, mature, and uniquely his own. "Perfect," Richard called out after the take. "That's the one." It had been a whirlwind 3 months. The video of Marcus's performance had exceeded 1 billion views across all platforms. He'd been invited to perform on late-night talk shows, at charity galas, and even at the White House. But through it all, Marcus had remained grounded, thanks largely to Rose's firm guidance. "You're still doing your homework before any rehearsals," she'd insist, and Marcus would comply without complaint. The door to the studio opened, and a familiar figure entered using a walker, moving slowly but determinedly. Theodore Johnson, released from the nursing home thanks to Richard's funding for proper rehabilitation and care, made his way to the piano. "Mr. Johnson." Marcus jumped up, rushing to help his teacher to a chair. "Listen to you," Mr. Johnson said, his speech much clearer after months of therapy. "Playing in the big studios now." His eyes twinkled with pride. "Show me what you're working on." As Marcus played the new composition, Mr. Johnson nodded along, occasionally raising a finger to suggest a subtle change. Even Isabella Cruz, who had become Marcus's co-mentor, deferred to Johnson's judgment. He was, after all, the one who had first recognized and nurtured Marcus's gift. "The documentary crew is here," Victoria Chen announced, entering the studio. She had left her position at Riverside to manage the newly established Thompson Music Foundation, which had already provided instruments and lessons to over 500 children from underserved communities. The documentary, titled Playing in the Light, had been following Marcus's journey for the past 2 months. It would premiere at Sundance, but Marcus was more excited about the screening they'd arranged for his neighborhood, where kids could see that someone like them had made it. 5 minutes, then we need to get back to recording, Richard said, but his tone was warm. The transformation in him had been as dramatic as Marcus's rise. He'd become an advocate for music education, using his platform to raise awareness and funds. His relationship with Marcus had evolved from reluctant acceptance to genuine mentorship and friendship. The documentary director positioned Marcus at the piano for an interview segment. Marcus, what would you tell other kids who are told they don't belong somewhere? Marcus thought for a moment, his hands unconsciously finding the keys. I'd tell them that belonging isn't something other people get to decide for you. If you have something to offer, if you have truth to share, then you belong anywhere you choose to stand, or in my case, sit. He played a few notes. Music taught me that. It doesn't care about your zip code or your clothes or your age. It only cares if you're willing to listen and learn and practice. And Richard, the director, turned to the singer. What did you learn from this experience? Richard laughed, but it was self-deprecating rather than mocking. I learned that I'd become everything I used to hate about the music industry, a gatekeeper more concerned with image than artistry. Marcus didn't just teach me about music, he taught me about character. When someone offers to help, maybe actually listen to what they can do. The recording session resumed, and as the day progressed, more visitors arrived. Sarah Mitchell, whose viral video had started everything, was writing a book about the incident and its aftermath. The Whitmores stopped by to check on the foundation's progress, having become its largest donors. Even Connor, fully recovered and gracious about being replaced, came to contribute keyboard parts to the album. You know, Connor said to Marcus during a break, I should be upset that a 12-year-old plays my parts better than me. But honestly, it's inspiring. You've made me want to practice again, to push myself. That's what great artists do, they elevate everyone around them. As the sun set over Los Angeles, the recording session wrapped up. Marcus stood outside the studio with his grandmother, looking up at a billboard across the street. It advertised Sterling Heights' upcoming world tour, and there, alongside the band members, was Marcus's picture. Featuring Marcus Thompson, it read in letters just as large as the band's name. You proud of that, baby? Rose asked. I'm proud that it also mentions the Thompson Music Foundation, Marcus replied. And that every show will include a free workshop for local kids. A car pulled up, and out stepped 3 children from Marcus's neighborhood, instruments in hand. They were his first students, kids he was teaching for free every Saturday morning. Mr. Marcus, one of them called out. Can you show us that chord progression again? As Marcus sat with the children on the studio steps, teaching them the same patience and love that Mr. Johnson had shown him, Richard watched from the doorway. Emma joined him. Look at him, she said. 12 years old and already passing it forward. He never forgot where he came from, Richard observed. That's what makes him special. Not just the talent, but the heart. Inside the studio, the producer was listening to the playback of the day's recording. He'd worked with the biggest names in music for 30 years, but what he heard in Marcus's playing was different. It wasn't just technical skill or even emotional depth. It was hope, pure, undiluted hope that music could still change the world, one note at a time. As night fell, Marcus finished his impromptu lesson with the neighborhood kids. They were struggling with a particularly difficult passage, getting frustrated. Remember, Marcus told them, every professional was once a beginner. Every master was once a disaster. I used to sneak into Riverside just to touch a real piano. Now I'm recording in studios. But it didn't happen overnight. It happened one practice session at a time, one note at a time. Were you scared? The youngest student asked. When you played in front of all those people? Terrified, Marcus admitted. But Mr. Johnson taught me something. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's playing anyway. It's believing your music deserves to be heard even when others say it doesn't. As the families came to pick up their children, Marcus noticed a figure standing in the shadows. It was another young boy, maybe 10 years old, holding a battered violin case. Can I help you? Marcus asked. I heard you teach kids for free, the boy said shyly. But I play violin, not piano. Marcus smiled, remembering his own nervousness when he'd first approached Richard Sterling. Music is music, he said. Come back Saturday. We'll figure it out together. As the boy ran off excitedly, Rose put her arm around Marcus. You know this is going to grow bigger than you can handle alone. That's the point, Grandma. It should be bigger than one person. Every kid who learns to play teaches another. Every stage that opens up makes room for someone else. That's how we change things. Richard approached them, holding a letter. Marcus, this came for you at the label. The return address was the Royal Academy of Music in London. Marcus opened it, his eyes widening as he read. They're offering me a full scholarship. To study with them while touring. That's amazing, baby! Rose exclaimed. But Marcus looked conflicted. It means leaving home. Leaving my students. Or, Richard suggested, it means learning more so you can teach more. The tour will bring you back here regularly. And imagine a kid from the neighborhood studying at the Royal Academy. What message does that send to every other kid who's been told they can't? Marcus looked at the letter again, then at the billboard with his picture, then at the studio where he'd just spent the day creating music with heroes who had become friends. 6 months ago, he'd been a boy playing piano in secret. Now, he had choices, opportunities, and most importantly, a platform to lift others. Mr. Johnson, Marcus said, turning to his first teacher who had been quietly observing. What do you think? The old jazzmaster smiled, his eyes bright with pride. I think you already know the answer. Play your truth, wherever that takes you. But never forget, the music isn't about me, Marcus finished. It's about everyone who needs to hear it. As they prepared to leave, Marcus took one last look at the studio, the billboard, the city lights stretching out before him. This was just the beginning. There would be tours, albums, accolades, and challenges. There would be other kids like him, waiting in the shadows with their gifts hidden, their dreams deferred. But now he knew, and more importantly, they would know that talent could come from anywhere. That stages weren't reserved for the privileged few. That sometimes, all it took was one person brave enough to ask, "Can I play?" 6 months ago, Marcus Thompson had asked that question and been told no. Tonight, he stood as living proof that no was just the beginning of the story, not the end. Dear fiends, music has the power to break down walls we didn't even know existed. Marcus's story reminds us that talent doesn't check zip codes or bank accounts before choosing where to land. Every child deserves the chance to discover their gift, to share their voice, to play their truth. When we judge by appearances rather than ability, we don't just hurt individuals, we rob the world of beauty it desperately needs. Next time you see a young person reaching for a dream that seems too big, remember Marcus Thompson. Remember that the greatest symphonies often begin with a single, uncertain note played by someone who was told they didn't belong. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that their dreams matter too.